I'm 30 years old and by all standards people would call me a professional woman, someone who carries herself with grace, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to her work. But what no one really sees is the quieter side of me, the one that carries a certain loneliness. My life had always been about proving myself, proving that I wasn't too young to be taken seriously, proving that I could handle pressure, proving that responsibility wasn't defined by age. My colleagues often left the office as soon as the clock struck 6, but for me, leaving without finishing what I had started felt like breaking a promise to myself. That night was no different. The office, usually bustling with voices, footsteps, and the clinking of coffee mugs, had grown silent. The hum of the ceiling fan, and the soft tapping of my fingers on the keyboard were the only sounds that kept me company. The yellow glow of the desk lamp cast shadows across my table, papers scattered everywhere like unfinished stories waiting to be told. My eyes burned from staring at the screen too long, but I pressed on, determined to complete the report that had been hanging over me all week. It was almost 9, when I heard the faint click of heels echoing across the polished marble floor. My heart skipped for a second. I thought everyone had left hours ago. I straightened in my chair, brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear, when I saw her. Emma, my boss, a 35-year-old woman who carried authority in her stride and elegance in her voice. She wasn't just respected in the office, she was admired. People said she had an aura, something about the way she looked at you, listened to you, made you feel both nervous and seen at the same time. I had always kept my distance, never daring to invite unnecessary attention. She paused at the door of my cabin, her brows raised ever so slightly in surprise. "You're still here." Her voice was soft, curious, yet tinged with disbelief. I quickly minimized the document and gave her a small, polite smile. "Yes, just finishing up some reports." Emma stepped in, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. She tilted her head, eyes scanning the stack of papers on my desk. "Why are you working so late? Everyone else left hours ago." There was no accusation in her tone, just genuine curiosity. Still, my heart beat a little faster under her gaze. I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. I don't like leaving things unfinished. I'd rather stay late than go home knowing something is pending." For a moment, silence hung between us. Emma looked at me in a way she never had before, not as a boss evaluating an employee, but as a woman trying to understand another. Her lips curved slightly, as if she was both surprised and impressed. "I see," she said finally, her voice carrying a warmth I hadn't noticed before. "That's rare. Most people would have packed up the moment the clock struck 6. I gave a small shrug, trying to play it down even though inside, her words meant more to me than they should have. "Work doesn't end with the clock, does it? At least, not for me." Her eyes lingered on me a little longer than necessary, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, not like in the movies where time stops and music swells. No, it was subtler, a quiet recognition, as though she had just seen me for the first time. Until that night, I knew Emma had thought of me as one of those younger employees, responsible enough, but maybe not deeply committed. I had felt it in the way she kept her distance, the way she gave instructions without really looking at me. But now, under the dim light of my desk lamp, her expression softened. "You should be careful though," she said gently, "don't burn yourself out." I smiled faintly. "I'll be fine. This is who I am. I don't leave until my work is finished." Emma nodded, her eyes still fixed on me, and then she glanced at her watch as though reminding herself of the time. But she didn't leave immediately. She stood there for a few more seconds, a thoughtful look on her face, before finally stepping back toward the door. "All right then, don't stay too late," she murmured, almost as if it was more of a suggestion than an order. As she walked away, the sound of her heels faded down the hallway, but her presence lingered in my cabin. I stared at the empty doorway, feeling an unusual warmth in my chest. Something about the way she had looked at me, different, softer, stayed with me as I returned to my work. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel entirely invisible. The next morning, when I walked into the office, everything felt the same at first, the soft chatter of colleagues settling in, the clinking of mugs as coffee machines brewed the day's first round, the rustling of papers. Yet, something was different. Or maybe it was me, carrying the memory of last night's brief but meaningful conversation with Emma. I didn't expect her to remember it, let alone act any differently. She was my boss, after all, a woman with far bigger responsibilities than worrying about one employee's work habits. But as soon as I entered the meeting room, I noticed her eyes. They found me almost immediately, and for a fleeting second she smiled, small, subtle, but undeniably there. It wasn't the usual professional acknowledgement, it carried something warmer. During the meeting, while the department heads tossed around ideas, Emma suddenly turned to me. "What do you think?" she asked. The room went silent for a moment. I almost thought she had spoken to someone else. Me? She had never really asked for my input directly before, especially in front of everyone. My fingers curled around the edge of my notepad as I steadied my voice. "I think if we adjust the timeline slightly and reassign some of the smaller tasks, we can actually meet the deadline without compromising quality." Emma listened, really listened, her chin resting lightly on her hand, her eyes not leaving mine. When I finished, she gave a slow nod. "That's a solid point. Let's do it that way." A ripple went through the room, small, almost imperceptible, but I felt it. The others noticed, too. I had just been validated by Emma, in front of everyone. My chest swelled with quiet pride, but more than that, I felt seen. Over the next few days, little things began to happen. One morning, I walked into my cabin to find a steaming cup of coffee waiting on my desk. A sticky note was attached to the cup: "Don't skip breakfast next time. E." My lips curved into a smile before I could stop myself. She had noticed. Later that week, around lunch, she passed by my desk and paused. "Did you eat yet?" she asked casually. I looked up, surprised. "Not yet. I was just about to." Her gaze softened. "Don't delay it too much. Work can wait, but health doesn't." She said it in a tone that wasn't commanding, but caring, almost protective. Those gestures may have seemed small to anyone else, but to me, they meant everything. I wasn't just another employee anymore. I mattered. It wasn't just her actions that shifted, though, it was her presence. Whenever she walked into the office, her eyes searched for me first. Sometimes, it was nothing more than a fleeting glance, a silent acknowledgement across the room. Other times, it was a quiet word at my desk: "How's your workload today?" or "Don't hesitate to reach out if you need help." The first sparks of warmth began to kindle between us, subtle yet undeniable. I caught myself thinking about her outside of work, her voice, her smile, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. The office, meanwhile, had its own rhythm, and people weren't blind. Colleagues noticed the way Emma lingered near my desk more often than before, the way she valued my input in discussions. They didn't say much, but I could feel the whispers in the air, the sideways glances. No one dared to comment openly. Emma commanded too much respect for that, but their silence carried its own weight. At first, I worried. I didn't want people to think I was being favored unfairly, or worse, that I was trying to win her approval in ways beyond professionalism. But as days passed, that fear lessened. Because with Emma, none of it felt transactional. Every gesture, every glance, every word of kindness, it felt genuine, like something beyond the roles of boss and employee. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I heard her footsteps behind me. "Heading home?" she asked, her tone unusually soft. "Yes," I said, turning to face her. For once I finished everything before the clock struck 8. I laughed lightly. She chuckled, and the sound warmed me more than it should have. "Good. You deserve a break. Don't let your dedication consume all of you." Her words lingered with me the entire ride home. I realized that Emma wasn't just noticing me, she was caring for me, in her own quiet, deliberate ways. And for the first time in years, I felt the walls I had built around myself beginning to soften. Something was happening, something neither of us had named yet, but it was there, breathing quietly between us in every glance, every word, every act of gentle attention. And though we hadn't crossed any lines, I knew deep down, we were moving closer to something that neither of us could stop. It became a pattern after that, Emma staying back later than usual, just like me. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but soon it was clear it wasn't. She would walk into my cabin around 7, her jacket folded over her arm, and ask, "Still working?" I would smile, as if the answer wasn't obvious, and she would step inside, closing the door behind her. Sometimes she brought her own laptop and worked alongside me, other times she simply sat across the desk, sipping her coffee and talking while I typed. It was different, having her there. The silence of the office no longer felt heavy, it felt comforting, almost intimate. We laughed more than I thought we ever could. She teased me about my messy handwriting, and I teased her about the way she furrowed her brow when she read. Slowly, the walls of formality between us began to fade. One evening, she leaned back in her chair, her hair slipping loose from its bun, and sighed. "You know, everyone thinks being the boss is glamorous. They imagine power, respect, people listening to you. But they don't see how exhausting it can be." I paused my typing, looking at her. There was something raw in her voice I hadn't heard before. "What do you mean?" She glanced at me, her eyes softer than usual. "When you're the one in charge, you don't get to fall apart. You can't show weakness. Even on days when you're drowning inside, you have to stand tall, smile, and pretend everything is fine." Sometimes, she trailed off, shaking her head lightly. "Sometimes it feels like I'm performing for everyone, and no one really knows me." Her honesty caught me off guard. Emma was always so composed, so untouchable. Seeing this vulnerable side of her stirred something in me. "That sounds lonely," I said quietly. She smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. "It is." For a moment, we just sat there in silence. The air felt different, thicker, charged. I wanted to say something that would matter, something that would ease the heaviness in her voice. So I spoke the truth I rarely shared with anyone. "I know what you mean. People look at me and assume things too. That I'm young, careless, maybe not serious enough about life. No matter how hard I work, I always feel like I have to prove myself twice as much just to be taken seriously." Emma's eyes softened further, almost like she was seeing me for the first time all over again. "Is that why you push yourself so much?" I nodded, my throat tightening. "Yes. I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want anyone to think I'm irresponsible just because of my age. So I stay late, I overdeliver, I try to be perfect. But sometimes it feels like I'm running in circles, trying to outrun their judgment." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, alive with emotions we hadn't dared to express before. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice low but certain. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I see you, really see you. And I'm impressed by who you are, not just the work you do." Her words landed deep in my chest, warming places I hadn't realized were cold. I didn't know how to respond, so I just held her gaze, letting the moment wrap around us like a blanket. As the days turned into weeks, these conversations became our ritual. Laughter flowed easily, but so did the silences, those long stretches where no words were needed, just the comfort of knowing someone was there. And then came the night that changed everything. We had been laughing at something ridiculous, a typo in a report that turned client into giant, and Emma had mimicked an overdramatic scenario of presenting it in a boardroom. I laughed so hard that tears prickled my eyes, and she joined in, her usually serious face glowing with pure amusement. For a moment, we were just two women, no titles, no roles, no barriers. As the laughter faded, quietness returned, but it wasn't empty. It was thick, alive, almost electric. I felt her eyes on me, steady and searching. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. I didn't move, afraid the moment would shatter if I did. Then, slowly, Emma leaned forward. She hesitated, her gaze flickering between my eyes and my lips, as if silently asking for permission. My breath caught, but I didn't look away. She reached across the desk, her hand brushing gently against mine, and then, with a tenderness that made my chest ache, she leaned in and pressed her lips softly against my forehead. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a shiver down my spine, a warmth spreading through me that no words could describe. When she pulled back slightly, our eyes met again. The air between us felt fragile, sacred. And then, as if guided by something neither of us could resist, she closed the small distance and kissed me on the lips. It wasn't hurried or demanding. It was soft, hesitant, filled with care. The kind of kiss that asks rather than takes, that speaks more of love than of desire. My eyes fluttered shut as the world around me blurred into nothing. All I could feel was her, the warmth of her lips, the gentleness of her touch, the way her presence filled every corner of my heart in that single moment. When she finally pulled away, just enough to look at me, I felt my chest tighten with something I had never felt before. My lips still tingled, my heart raced, and yet, I felt a calmness too, as if something inside me had finally found where it belonged. I searched for words but none came. And maybe none were needed. Because in that kiss, Emma had spoken everything, her care, her affection, her own loneliness, and the truth that had been quietly growing between us all along. That night, as we packed our things in silence and walked out of the office side by side, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. After that night, something invisible but undeniable bound us together. It wasn't written down or spoken out loud, but it lived in every glance, every smile, every brush of her hand against mine. The office, once just a place of deadlines and pressure, became the setting of something far more delicate, our secret, blooming love. Emma was careful, of course. She had to be. She was the boss, the one everyone watched, the one no one dared to question but always whispered about in private. And yet, with me, she wasn't the boss. She was just Emma, warm, gentle, vulnerable. Every morning when she walked into the office, she would stop by my cabin before anyone else had the chance to settle in. She would lean close, her perfume wrapping around me like a quiet embrace, and kiss me softly. Sometimes on my cheek, sometimes on my lips, quick and light, but enough to make my heart race and my skin tingle. It became our ritual, our unspoken greeting, and when she left in the evenings, no matter how late it was, she never walked past me without stopping. She would lean in again, her eyes holding mine for just a heartbeat longer than necessary, and kiss me goodnight. Those moments were brief, but they were everything. They were reminders that even in the chaos of reports and board meetings, there was a tenderness that belonged only to us. Her cabin became our small sanctuary. On hectic days, I would slip inside with files, and after discussing work, our hands would find each other beneath the desk. Her fingers, warm and steady, would wrap around mine, grounding me in ways nothing else could. Sometimes, when the office grew quiet in the evenings, I would sit on the couch in her cabin while she finished her emails, and I would rest my head on her shoulder. She never pushed me away. Instead, she would tilt her head ever so slightly, letting her hair brush against mine, as though even that tiny contact was precious. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. Completely, utterly safe. Emma wasn't just my boss anymore, she was the person who made me feel seen, cherished, and cared for in ways I had only dreamed about. Her affection was gentle but consistent, never demanding, never rushed. It was like being wrapped in a warmth I had been searching for without realizing it. There were moments when I caught myself staring at her during meetings, marveling at how composed she was in front of everyone, how effortlessly she commanded respect. And then, my chest would swell with a secret pride, because I was the one who knew her softer side, the one who had seen her laugh until tears spilled, the one who had felt her lips tremble in a tender kiss. That knowledge was mine alone, and it made the world feel brighter. The secrecy added its own kind of magic. No one in the office knew, not for certain, at least. They noticed we were close, yes, but not the truth hidden beneath the surface. The stolen touches, the lingering glances, the way her eyes softened when they landed on me, those were ours. Ours to protect, ours to treasure. Sometimes I wondered what people would say if they knew. Would they judge us? Would they reduce our love to gossip, to rumors of favoritism? The thought scared me, but then I would remember the way Emma looked at me, as if I were the one person who mattered in her carefully guarded world. And suddenly, none of it mattered. Life changed in ways I hadn't expected. The loneliness that once wrapped around me like a heavy coat began to dissolve. My days no longer felt like endless routines, they had meaning, color, and warmth. Even the simple act of walking into the office filled me with anticipation, because I knew she would be there. I often found myself lost in quiet reflections. How did this happen? One late night at work, a conversation, a kiss, and suddenly, my entire world was different. I had spent years believing that I had to carry everything on my own, that love and care were luxuries reserved for others. But Emma proved me wrong. She gave me something deeper than romance, she gave me belonging. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying the smallest moments, her laughter, her touch, the way she whispered my name when no one else was around. And my heart swelled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. I had stumbled into something rare, something fragile yet fierce. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't be, not when we had to hide from the world. But in many ways, the secrecy made it more beautiful. It was our story, unfolding quietly in the spaces between deadlines and responsibilities. Every kiss, every stolen moment was a promise, a reminder that we had found each other against all odds, and as the days turned into weeks, I knew with certainty that I was no longer the same woman who stayed late that night out of duty. I was no longer just a professional trying to prove herself. I was loved. I was cared for. And in Emma's arms, in her kisses, in the way she looked at me, I had found the piece of myself I hadn't even known was missing. Our secret world didn't stay confined within office walls forever. Emma was the one who broke the pattern first. One evening, as I was gathering my things, she lingered at my desk, her eyes carrying that familiar warmth. "Come with me," she said softly, almost like a suggestion but one I couldn't refuse. I hesitated for a second, glancing around the nearly empty office. "Where?" She smiled, the kind of smile that made my chest tighten. "Just out. Somewhere away from here." That night, she took me to a quiet little coffee shop tucked between tall buildings, a place I had passed countless times without noticing. It was cozy, with shelves of books lining the walls and the scent of roasted beans lingering in the air. We sat in a corner booth, the dim light above us painting her features in gentle shadows. It was the first time I saw Emma outside the office, without the armor of her blazer and authority. She looked softer. Human. And I couldn't stop staring. We talked for hours. At first about trivial things, our favorite books, the kind of movies we secretly enjoyed, the silly quirks we had. She laughed when I confessed I sometimes sang to myself while working late, and I laughed when she admitted she always double-checked the locks at least 3 times before sleeping. But as the evening grew deeper, so did our words. The laughter softened into silence, and in that silence, she spoke about her past. "I haven't told anyone this," she began, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup, "but I wasn't always this guarded." I listened, my heart already aching at the weight in her tone. "There was someone, years ago. I thought it was love, no, I believed it was love. But it ended badly. They left without explanation, and for a long time I blamed myself. After that, I promised I'd never let anyone get close again. It was easier to build walls than to risk being shattered." She finally lifted her gaze, and in her eyes, I saw a fragility that few people ever got to see. "For years I thought love wasn't meant for me, but then you stayed late that night, and I saw something in you." Her confession left me speechless at first. My throat tightened as I reached across the table, my fingers finding hers. The warmth of her hand against mine felt like an unspoken vow. "I never thought my boss would be the one who touched my heart this way," I whispered. And I meant it. Out of all the unexpected twists life could bring, this was the one that felt both impossible and inevitable. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she squeezed my hand gently. "You make it sound like fate. Maybe it is, I replied, half smiling, half serious. After coffee, we wandered out into the night air. The city was alive, lights shimmering against the dark sky, but somehow the world felt smaller, quieter, like it existed only for us. We walked side by side, our hands brushing until finally she took mine in hers. The touch was firm, steady, and when our fingers intertwined, I felt the kind of ease that comes from belonging. We walked like that for what felt like forever, two women who, by day, had to wear masks of professionalism, but by night, could be nothing more than lovers discovering each other. We laughed at silly things, a street musician playing off-key, a stray cat that followed us for a block, the way I nearly tripped on a loose stone. And with each laugh, each smile, the heaviness of her past seemed to lift, replaced by something lighter, freer. At one point, we stopped by a quiet park bench, the world around us hushed. Emma turned toward me, her eyes reflecting the streetlights like tiny stars. "You know," she said softly, "I'm still scared. Scared of losing this, of ruining it. But when I'm with you, it feels different. It feels like I can breathe again." I reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You won't lose me, Emma. Not to fear, not to anyone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell, and in that moment, I understood just how much this love meant to her, how fragile it was, how brave she had to be to open her heart again. We sat there in silence, hand in hand, the night wrapping around us like a promise. And as she leaned in, resting her forehead lightly against mine, I realized that my life had shifted in ways I couldn't undo. I wasn't just her employee, her secret, or her companion in stolen moments. I was the one she trusted with the parts of herself she had hidden for years. And that knowledge filled me with a kind of love that was deeper than I had ever known. It started with whispers. At first, I thought it was in my head, the way colleagues glanced at us when Emma called me into her cabin more than once in an afternoon, the subtle smiles exchanged when I returned with a softer glow on my face. But soon the air in the office felt heavy, carrying questions unspoken yet loudly present. One afternoon, while I was pouring coffee in the break room, a colleague leaned against the counter beside me. She stirred her cup slowly, her eyes lingering on me longer than necessary. "You and Emma seem close," she said casually, though her tone carried a sharp edge of curiosity. I froze, the spoon in my hand clinking against the mug. My heart raced, but I forced a calm smile. "She's my boss. We work together." "Of course," she replied, lips curving into a knowing smirk. "I just meant, you're always around her. It's noticeable." Her words burned into me even after I walked away. That night, I told Emma. She went very still, her pen frozen above a document on her desk. Slowly, she put it down and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "So they've started talking." "It doesn't matter," I said quickly, reaching for her hand across the desk. "Let them think what they want. We know the truth." But she pulled her hand back, folding her arms as though protecting herself. "It does matter. I can't afford scandal, not here. My reputation, my career, it could all fall apart if people find out." The distance in her voice stung. "So what are you saying? That we should stop?" Her eyes flickered with conflict, and she pressed her lips together. "I don't know. What if people find out?" The question hung in the air like a blade. I felt my chest tighten, frustration bubbling beneath my skin. "Emma, do you hear yourself? You're already making it sound like we've something to be ashamed of." "That's not what I mean," she snapped, louder than intended, before lowering her voice again. "I'm scared. Can't you understand that?" The hurt in her eyes was real, but so was mine. For the first time, we stood on opposite sides of the same fear, hers of exposure, mine of losing her. The days that followed were heavy with silence. She avoided lingering touches at work, stopped kissing me when I walked in, and her cabin, once our safe haven, became just another office again. I sat at my desk, watching her from afar, and every time her eyes avoided mine, a little piece of me crumbled. Nights were lonelier than ever. I replayed her words over and over. What if people find out? One evening, I found myself walking aimlessly after work, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. Love, I realized, wasn't always easy. It wasn't just soft kisses in hidden corners or tender whispers after hours. Sometimes it was tested by fear, by doubt, by the very world that refused to let it exist without question. And though my heart ached, I knew one thing for certain. I didn't regret a single moment with her. The tension lingered for over a week, until finally, Emma asked me to stay behind after everyone else had left. I entered her office cautiously, bracing myself for more distance. But when I saw her standing by the window, her shoulders tense, I knew something had shifted. "I hate this," she said quietly without turning. "Hate what?" I asked, my voice trembling. She turned to face me then, her eyes glistening. "This distance. This silence between us. I thought pushing you away would protect us, but all it's done is make me miserable." I exhaled shakily, relief and sadness mixing inside me. "Emma, I don't care what people whisper. I care about us. I just want you to stop being afraid of loving me." Her lips parted, as if those words broke something inside her. She closed the space between us in 2 quick steps, cupping my face with trembling hands. "You're right," she whispered, her forehead pressing against mine. I was terrified. "But I'd rather risk the world knowing than lose you like this." Her mouth found mine in a kiss that was soft yet desperate, tasting of apology and longing. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a renewal of everything we almost lost to fear. I melted into her, my arms circling her waist, holding her as if to anchor us both. When we finally broke apart, our breaths ragged, she rested her head against my shoulder. "Stay with me," she murmured. "No more distance. No more doubt." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were warm, healing ones. "Always, Emma. No matter what comes." And as I held her in that quiet office, the city outside alive with secrets and noise, I realized love wasn't about the absence of conflict, it was about surviving it together. We weren't perfect. We weren't safe. But we were real. And that was enough. The office had emptied out, leaving behind only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the glow of Emma's cabin light. I was gathering my things when her voice floated across the floor. "Stay back a little, please." Something in her tone made me pause. It wasn't her usual confident, composed self, it was fragile, almost pleading. I stepped into her cabin, closing the door behind me. She was seated at her desk, but her hands were clasped tightly, her knuckles pale, as though she'd been holding herself together for too long. "Emma?" I asked softly, moving closer. "What's wrong?" Her eyes lifted to mine, glassy with unshed tears. For a long moment, she said nothing, and the silence stretched between us like a thin thread about to snap. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said, "There's something I should have told you before all of this started." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She took a deep, shaky breath, as if the words were knives cutting her tongue. I'm already engaged. Not in the way you think, it's not love. It's an arrangement. My family expects it. They've been pushing me toward it for years, and I've never had the courage to defy them." The room spun around me. I stared at her, struggling to breathe. Engaged. The word felt foreign in my mouth, bitter and heavy. Emma's face crumpled as she reached across the desk for my hand. "I didn't plan this, us. I never saw it coming. You walked into my life and everything changed. I tried to fight it, I told myself I couldn't, but then you smiled at me, and I was lost." My fingers were trapped in her trembling grasp. 1,000 emotions rushed through me at once, betrayal, confusion, longing, and a desperate, stubborn love that refused to let go even in this moment of revelation. "So what are you saying?" My voice cracked. "That all of this, these kisses, these promises, was just temporary?" "No," she cried, her tears spilling over now. She stood suddenly and came around the desk, kneeling beside me as though her strength had finally broken. She cupped my face in both hands, her sobs hot against my skin. It was real. It is real. You are the only person who's ever made me feel alive, safe, seen. But I'm torn apart. I don't know how to break free from what my family demands of me. Tears blurred my own vision as I looked at her, the woman who had made my lonely heart believe again, now confessing to chains I never saw. Emma, why didn't you tell me before? I was afraid, she whispered desperately, her forehead pressing to mine. Afraid you'd walk away. Afraid I'd lose you before I even had the chance to hold you like this. The pain was unbearable, yet in that moment, I couldn't push her away. Her lips found mine in a kiss that was both tender and violent, soaked with desperation. We clung to each other as if the world outside her cabin no longer existed, as if love could erase the reality pressing against us. Her arms wrapped around me, and I held her just as tightly, my heart breaking even as it burned with love. Every kiss tasted like both promise and farewell, every touch a mixture of need and fear. Inside, my thoughts screamed. How can I compete with family expectations? How do I fight something that isn't just her choice, but her entire life's weight? But louder than my doubts was the ache of losing her. I wanted to be strong, to tell her to let go, but instead, my voice cracked with helpless devotion. I don't want to lose you, Emma. You won't, she sobbed against my lips, though neither of us believed the certainty in her words. I don't care what it takes, I'll fight this. I can't imagine my life without you anymore. Her tears soaked into my shoulder as I stroked her hair, whispering words I didn't even know I believed. We'll find a way. Somehow. Yet deep inside, I knew a storm was coming, one neither of us could escape unscarred. The final days of our relationship felt like stolen hours, fragile and fleeting, as though time itself knew what was coming and was hurrying us toward it. Every kiss grew heavier, weighted with unspoken fear, and every touch seemed to linger longer, as if neither of us wanted to let go. Emma's lips trembled against mine, and I realized she was trying to memorize me the way I was memorizing her, the tilt of her head, the softness of her laughter, the delicate way her hand would curl around my wrist. Love had never burned so brightly, and yet it had never felt so close to breaking. At the office, the air was thick with suspicion. Our colleagues were no longer subtle, their glances lingered, whispers trailed behind us like shadows. Emma carried it on her shoulders, the weight of their questions, their gossip, her family's endless expectations. And yet, even in those suffocating halls, she still found small ways to reach for me. A brush of her fingers against mine in the corridor. A stolen glance during a meeting. A smile that belonged only to me. Each fleeting connection was a reminder that what we had was real, real enough to frighten us both. One evening we sat together at our favorite cafe, the quiet hum of conversation surrounding us. She barely touched her latte, her eyes fixed on the swirl of foam, as though it held an answer she didn't want to face. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, but her fingers felt limp, cold. Emma, I whispered, talk to me. Her eyes lifted, filled with tears she fought to contain. Every time I think of choosing between you and them, she said softly, I feel like I'm tearing myself apart. I squeezed her hand, willing strength into her. Love isn't meant to be easy. But it's real. We're real. Her tears slipped free then, glistening in the cafe's dim light. Then why, she whispered, her voice breaking, does it feel like goodbye? Her words cut into me, sharp and merciless. I wanted to tell her that love was enough, that we could weather it all if we just held on tighter. But the silence that followed was heavier than anything either of us could carry. The end arrived differently, depending on how I let myself remember it. In one version, Emma called me into her office late at night. She was dressed with her usual grace, but her face was pale, her hands trembling. She didn't sit behind her desk, didn't pretend to be my boss. She simply walked toward me and said, I can't fight them anymore. They're my family. If I choose you, I lose them. I can't do it. My heart cracked, but I forced my voice to stay steady. And what about us? She cupped my cheek, her tears spilling freely. You were my first real love. My only real love. But sometimes love exists only to show us what our hearts are capable of, even if we can't keep it forever. Her kiss that night was fire and ashes, passion and farewell. When she pulled away, sobbing, I knew she was gone. I walked home under the dim streetlights, my chest hollow yet strangely full. I had touched love, and though it slipped from my hands, it would live inside me forever. In another version, the one I sometimes let myself dream, Emma broke the silence with fire in her eyes. The office was buzzing with chatter when she stood tall in front of everyone, her voice carrying across the room. I've spent too long living for everyone else. Today, I choose myself. And I choose her. Shock froze the air, whispers rippled, but Emma's steps were steady as she walked straight to me. Before I could breathe, she took my hand and kissed me, deeply, fearlessly, in front of them all. Gasps filled the room, but her lips silenced every doubt I'd ever carried. She pulled back only enough to press her forehead to mine and whisper, let them talk. Let them disapprove. I'm done hiding. I love you, and that's enough. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered back, you're my forever. The office blurred, the world faded, and for once, love was not a secret but a truth we dared to live out loud. No matter which version I cling to, the heartbreak that tore us apart, or the miracle that bound us forever, one truth remains unshakable, that one late night changed everything. From being just her employee, I became her lover, her safe place, her forever.